So, this is my first time posting here, and honestly, I wish I didn't have to. I don't usually share stuff like this, but I need to warn people. It's been eating me alive, and if I don't get it out there, I think I'll go crazy. It's a long story, so bear with me. This all started about 6 months ago when I was knee-deep in boredom and stupidity. I'd just lost my job, was behind on rent, and had way too much time on my hands. You know how it goes. One minute you're clicking through random YouTube videos, and the next, you're reading about the dark web. I'd always been a curious guy, and the thought of something so forbidden and hidden away had me hooked instantly. So I decided to dive in. And yes, I know how stupid that sounds now. I got myself set up with a VPN, downloaded Tor, and started exploring. At first, it was just what you'd expect. Dodgy-looking marketplaces, forums filled with conspiracy theories, and more illegal stuff than you could shake a stick at. I knew to stay away from the bad stuff. At least, I thought I did. But then I stumbled across a site called Arcane Archives. It was this dusty corner of the web claiming to have all sorts of ancient knowledge, rituals, spells, you name it. Most of it looked like nonsense, but there was a part of me that couldn't resist digging deeper. That's where I found it, a post titled Fire of Renewal. It was framed like a cleansing ritual, promising to burn away the burdens holding you back, give you a fresh start. Sounded like exactly what I needed at that moment. The post had a ton of replies, most of them saying how it worked, wonders for them. I was desperate and stupid enough to think it could actually help me. I should have known better. The instructions were simple. Light a candle, chant some Latin-sounding words, and meditate on what you wanted to change in your life. But it had a weird catch. Something about offering a piece of yourself. I figured it was symbolic, like giving up a bad habit or something. The comments didn't really explain it further, and I was too eager to pay attention to the red flags, so I decided to try it. I waited until everyone in the house was asleep, my wife, Karen, and our 2 kids, Tommy and Lucy. God, I wish I could take it all back. I remember sitting in our dimly lit living room, candle flickering in the dark. The air felt heavy, charged almost. I chalked it up to nerves as I read aloud the words from the screen. The language was strange, harsh, like trying to speak through a mouthful of gravel. As I finished the chant, I felt a sharp pain in my left eye, like someone had jabbed it with a needle. I doubled over, clutching my face, but the pain vanished as quickly as it came. I figured it was just a side effect of sitting too close to the screen. I was an idiot. Nothing happened at first. I blew out the candle, shook off the weird feeling, and went to bed. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Karen was making breakfast. The kids were arguing over cartoons. I laughed at myself for being so freaked out over nothing. But then, as the day went on, things started to feel off. Karen was unusually quiet, withdrawn. When I asked if something was wrong, she just shook her head and forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was like she was there, but not really there, if that makes sense. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd done something wrong, like I'd messed with something I shouldn't have. The kids were acting strange too. Tommy, usually the loudest kid on the planet, barely said a word all day. Lucy wouldn't let go of her teddy bear, clutching it like it was the only thing keeping her safe. I tried to brush it off, blaming it on a long week, but deep down, I knew it was something more. That night, I woke up to the smell of smoke. My heart stopped as I realized it was coming from inside the house. I jumped out of bed, panic surging through me as I ran down the hallway. The living room was engulfed in flames, the fire roaring like a living beast. I could barely see through the smoke, but I could hear Karen and the kids screaming. I tried to reach them, but the heat was unbearable. The flames were everywhere, clawing at the walls, the floor, everything. I don't know how long I fought to get to them, my skin blistering from the heat. But it was no use. The fire was relentless, pushing me back until I stumbled out the front door, collapsing on the lawn. I lay there, gasping for air, my mind unable to process what was happening. The fire department arrived what felt like an eternity later, the sirens blaring through the night. I watched helplessly as they battled the flames, my world falling apart around me. When it was finally over, they told me what I already knew, but couldn't accept. Karen, Tommy, Lucy, they didn't make it. My family, gone in an instant, consumed by a fire I had brought into our home. And as if that wasn't enough, they told me something else. My left eye was gone. Not burned, not injured, just gone, like it had been plucked out by some unseen force. I knew then that the ritual had worked. just not in the way I'd hoped. I'd asked for a fresh start, and it had taken everything from me. The price of offering a piece of myself was far more literal and horrifying than I'd imagined. This is just the beginning of the nightmare that's become my life. Part of me thinks I deserve this, for being so reckless, for playing with things I didn't understand. But another part of me needs answers, needs to know what I unleashed and why it demanded such a terrible price. I'll post more soon if I can bring myself to relive it. Just remember, if you ever find yourself tempted by something on the dark web, turn back. No curiosity is worth the hell I've been through. The weeks after the fire were a blur of grief, guilt, and disbelief. I was in and out of hospitals, both for the burns and for the empty socket where my eye had been. But nothing they did could touch the deeper wounds, the ones eating away at my mind. I barely ate or slept, living in a haze of nightmares and regret. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, heard their screams, felt the heat of the flames all over again. The cops called it an accident, an electrical fault that started the fire. But I knew better. I knew it was something else, something darker. I was too afraid to tell them what really happened. Terrified they'd think I was crazy, or worse, that I'd somehow set the fire on purpose. I couldn't tell them about the ritual or the website. I mean, who would believe me? For weeks, I drifted through the days like a ghost, avoiding people, ignoring calls. My in-laws tried to reach out, probably wanting to know what happened, but I couldn't face them. I couldn't even face myself. The weight of it was crushing, but amidst the despair, a part of me was desperate for answers, for some explanation that would make sense of the madness. I needed to understand what I had done, what I had released into my life. One night, I decided to revisit the arcane archives. I know it sounds insane, going back to the place that started this nightmare, but I felt like I had no other choice. I had to know more about the ritual, about the site itself. Maybe there was something I missed, some clue that would help me make sense of it all. Getting back on the dark web was easier than I thought, and soon I was staring at the same posts that had caught my attention before. I scrolled through the comments, searching for anything that might explain the horrifying outcome. Most of them were just people claiming success or bragging about how it changed their lives for the better. But then I found one that made my blood run cold. It was from a user named Verum Aeternum, and it said something like, "Beware the price of true change. The fire cleanses, but it also consumes. What you seek comes with a cost, often more than you're willing to pay. Those who burn away the past must face the ashes alone." The comment had been downvoted into oblivion, buried beneath the pile of praise and excitement. I couldn't shake the feeling that this person knew what they were talking about, that they had experienced something similar. I clicked on their profile, hoping to find more information, maybe a way to contact them. To my surprise, Verum Aeternum was still active on the site, posting about various rituals and their consequences. They seemed to have a grim understanding of what lay beneath the surface of these supposed spells. I sent them a message, pouring out everything that had happened, every detail I could remember, hoping for some kind of guidance or explanation. A few days later, I received a reply. It was short, cryptic. "The fire takes its due. You opened a door that cannot be closed. But there are ways to understand, ways to protect yourself. Meet me, alone." Attached was an address in a part of town I'd never been to before, along with a time to meet. Part of me was terrified. This was a total stranger from the dark web, after all, but another part of me was desperate. Desperate for answers, for closure, for anything that might make sense of the chaos. So I decided to go. The address led me to a rundown apartment building in a sketchy part of the city. The air was thick with the smell of decay, the kind of place where people disappear without a trace. I climbed the creaky stairs to the third floor, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't tell if it was fear or anticipation driving me forward. When I reached the door, I hesitated for a moment before knocking. The door opened almost immediately, revealing a tall, thin man with sharp features and eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. He nodded, stepping aside to let me in. The apartment was bare, just a few pieces of old furniture and stacks of books scattered everywhere. It felt more like a place to crash than a home. The man gestured for me to sit, and I did, still unsure if I was making a huge mistake. "You must be the one who tried the fire ritual," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "You look like hell." "Thanks," I muttered, glancing around nervously. "Are you Verum Aeternum?" He nodded. I am, and I know what you're going through. I've seen it before. That ritual, it's dangerous. It's not meant for cleansing. It's meant to open a door to something else, something ancient and hungry. I shivered, remembering the way the flames had roared to life, the way they'd taken everything from me. What do you mean, something hungry? He leaned forward, his expression grave. The fire of renewal doesn't just burn away the past. It draws the attention of things best left undisturbed. You offered a piece of yourself, but it took more than that. It took a part of your soul, a part of your life. And now, those things, those entities, they're aware of you. His words sent a chill down my spine. So what do I do? How do I stop it? You can't, he said bluntly. Once the door is open, it can't be closed. But you can learn to protect yourself, to keep them at bay. There are other rituals, other ways to shield yourself. But you have to be careful. Very careful. He handed me a small, worn notebook filled with notes and symbols, a guide to dealing with the things that now haunted me. It wasn't much, but it was something, a flicker of hope in the darkness. As I left his apartment, clutching the notebook like a lifeline, I realized I was in deeper than I'd ever imagined. I was marked, a beacon for whatever lurked beyond the veil. And if I wanted to survive, I'd have to learn the rules of this deadly game, to walk the thin line between our world and the one I'd unwittingly invited into my life. The real horror was just beginning, and I had to prepare myself for whatever came next. But at least now, I wasn't entirely alone. At least now, I had a chance to fight back. The days following my meeting with Verum Aeternum were a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. My world had tilted off its axis, and I was struggling to regain my balance. With the notebook in hand, I started to delve into the dark secrets I never imagined I'd need to know. The scrawled notes and cryptic symbols were overwhelming, but I forced myself to focus. Each page promised a sliver of protection, a way to hold back the nightmares I'd unleashed. The first thing I tried was a warding ritual, something simple to keep whatever entities I'd attracted at bay. I gathered the ingredients, salt, sage, and a few other things that weren't exactly easy to come by, and followed the instructions to the letter. I remember feeling ridiculous, crouched in the middle of my living room, sprinkling salt in a circle while muttering incantations. But as the ritual progressed, the air in the room shifted. It was subtle, but I could feel it. Like a heavy weight had been lifted off my chest. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night without nightmares. It was a small victory, but it gave me hope that I could at least manage the chaos I'd brought into my life. But the peace didn't last long. The entities, whatever they were, didn't take kindly to being shut out. It started with the shadows. They moved when they shouldn't, slithering along the walls like living things. I'd catch glimpses of them out of the corner of my eye, dark, twisted shapes that vanished the moment I turned to look. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks, a side effect of stress and sleepless nights. But deep down, I knew they were watching me. The noises came next. Whispering voices that drifted through the house at odd hours, just low enough to be indistinct, yet loud enough to send chills down my spine. They spoke in a language I couldn't understand, a guttural, rasping tongue that seemed to echo through the walls. I'd lie in bed, frozen in terror, straining to make sense of the sounds while every instinct screamed at me to run. But I had nowhere to go. This was my life now, and I was trapped in it. The fire had taken everything from me, leaving me isolated in a world filled with horrors of my own making. I couldn't turn to anyone, not without risking more than just my sanity. I was on my own, and I had to find a way to survive. I started studying the notebook religiously, desperate to uncover anything that could help me understand what I was dealing with. Every page was a new lesson in terror, a catalog of ancient knowledge and forbidden rites that could easily consume an unprepared mind. But I had no choice. This was my only lifeline, the only thing standing between me and the darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. One night, as I pored over the pages, I came across a section that sent a jolt of fear through me. It detailed a ritual of communication, a way to reach out to the entities and establish some form of contact. It was risky, but I needed answers. I needed to know what I was dealing with and why it had chosen me. The ritual required a mirror, a silver coin, and a drop of blood. Nothing too complicated, but enough to make my heart race as I gathered the items. I waited until midnight, the witching hour when the veil between worlds was at its thinnest. The house was silent, the air thick with anticipation as I stood before the mirror. I held the coin in one hand, pressing it to the glass, and pricked my finger with a pin. The drop of blood smeared against the cold surface, mingling with the reflection of my own terrified face. I spoke the incantation, my voice trembling as I called out to the unknown. For a moment, nothing happened. The room remained still, the shadows lurking at the edges of my vision. But then, the surface of the mirror shimmered, like ripples spreading across a pond. My reflection wavered, and a new image emerged, a face that wasn't my own. It was a woman, or at least it had been once. Her skin was pale and stretched tight over sharp bones, eyes hollow and filled with an ancient, knowing darkness. Her lips curled into a cruel smile, as if she'd been expecting me all along. "You've come a long way, haven't you?" Her voice echoed through the room, soft yet chilling, each word tinged with amusement. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who knows what you've done, what you've unleashed," she replied. "You've opened the door, and now it cannot be closed. But you already know that, don't you?" The terror in her eyes confirmed my worst fears. "What do you want from me?" I asked, feeling the chill of her gaze pierce through me. "Not from you, my dear," she said, her smile widening. "From what's left of you. The fire has taken its due, but the rest of you remains. You're a beacon now, a light in the darkness, drawing all sorts of unwanted attention." "Can I stop it?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "Can I make it go away?" "There are ways," she said, her tone turning grave. "But they come with a price. You've already paid a steep one. Are you willing to pay more?" Her words hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the path I'd chosen. I realized then that there was no easy way out, no simple solution to the nightmare I'd created. But I couldn't give up, not now. I had to find a way to protect myself, to shield what was left of my shattered life. "I'll do what I have to," I said, my voice filled with a determination I didn't feel. "I won't let them take anything else from me." The woman nodded, a hint of respect in her eyes. "Then prepare yourself. You've embarked on a dangerous journey, and there's no turning back now. The shadows are closing in, and you'll need all the help you can get to survive." With that, the image in the mirror faded, leaving me staring at my own haunted reflection. I knew then that the road ahead would be fraught with peril, but I had no choice. I was in too deep, trapped in a web of my own making. The real horror was just beginning, and I had to find a way to navigate the darkness before it consumed me entirely. The days following the ritual with the mirror were a struggle against fear and despair. Every corner of my house seemed to harbor malevolent shadows, lurking just out of sight. I felt like prey in my own home, constantly on edge, waiting for the next supernatural assault. The encounters with the shadows and the whispers had intensified, each night more terrifying than the last. I knew I had to act before these entities claimed what was left of me. Vera Maternum had warned me that the shadows were closing in, and I needed all the help I could get. I realized that surviving this ordeal meant understanding the entities and the consequences of the fire ritual. This realization led me back to the notebook, which had become my lifeline in this ordeal. As I pored over its contents, I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a set of pages near the end filled with illustrations of symbols and diagrams. It was labeled Bindings and Banishments. The concept of binding the entities was appealing, a way to regain control over my life. But the notes were cryptic, requiring a deeper understanding of the supernatural than I had. The instructions were clear yet complex, involving precise symbols and an incantation that had to be uttered flawlessly. I had to try, no matter the risk. Gathering the required items, a piece of chalk, some herbs I'd collected, and the silver coin from the communication ritual, I prepared to draw the symbols around the house. As I moved from room to room, I could feel the oppressive weight of the entities pressing in, watching my every move. The air was thick with tension, like a storm about to break. I knew I had to act quickly. In the living room, I drew the first symbol, a series of intricate lines and circles that were supposed to form a protective barrier. The chalk felt cold and heavy in my hand, leaving ghostly marks on the floor. With each stroke, I felt a strange energy pulsing through me, as if the act of drawing these symbols was awakening something within. I repeated the process in every room, speaking the incantation as I worked. My voice echoed through the empty house, mingling with the whispers of the entities. I could feel them pressing against the barriers, testing the strength of my defenses. The air hummed with a palpable tension as the ritual reached its climax. Just as I finished the final symbol, a powerful surge of energy coursed through the house. The shadows recoiled, retreating to the corners of the rooms, but they didn't vanish entirely. I could sense their fury, a simmering anger that promised retribution for being shut out. The ritual had worked, but only partially. I'd bought myself some time, but the entities weren't going to give up so easily. That night, I sat in the living room, clutching the notebook like a talisman. The house was quiet, but I knew it was the calm before the storm. I had managed to keep the entities at bay, but they were still there, waiting for their chance to strike. I was no closer to finding a permanent solution, and the fear of what might happen next kept me on edge. As I drifted into a restless sleep, I was plagued by vivid nightmares. I saw my family, their faces twisted in pain and anguish, reaching out to me from within the flames. Their cries for help echoed through my mind, a constant reminder of the price I'd paid for my foolishness. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. It was as if the entities were taunting me, using my own guilt against me. Desperate for guidance, I decided to reach out to Verum Aeternum once more. I sent a message detailing the binding ritual and its partial success, asking for any advice or insight he might have. Days passed without a reply, and I was beginning to lose hope. But then, one morning, I received a response that was both reassuring and unsettling. "The bindings are a temporary measure," he wrote. "The entities you've drawn are ancient and cunning, and they will find a way around your defenses eventually. To truly rid yourself of them, you must confront the source of their power. You need to return to the place where it all began, the ritual site. Only there can you sever the ties and end this once and for all." The thought of returning to the site of the ritual filled me with dread, but I knew he was right. I had to face the consequences of my actions head on if I ever wanted to be free. Gathering my courage, I made plans to revisit the site where my life had unraveled. It was a daunting task, but I was determined to see it through, to confront the entities and reclaim my life. The journey to the site was long and fraught with anxiety. Every step felt like walking into the jaws of the beast, but I couldn't turn back. The air was thick with the stench of smoke and decay, a grim reminder of the fire that had claimed my family. As I approached the spot where I'd performed the ritual, I felt the presence of the entities gathering around me, a suffocating cloud of darkness. I took a deep breath, clutching the notebook tightly. The final pages detailed a banishment ritual, a way to sever the ties and send the entities back to the void. It was a dangerous gamble, but I had nothing left to lose. Kneeling on the scorched earth, I began the ritual, drawing the final symbols with trembling hands. The entities swirled around me, their whispers turning into an angry roar. They knew what I was trying to do, and they weren't going to let it happen without a fight. I pushed forward, forcing myself to ignore the fear clawing at my mind. The incantation flowed from my lips, each word a desperate plea for freedom. As I spoke the final words, the air crackled with energy. The entities howled in fury, a cacophony of rage that threatened to drown me. But I held on, pouring every ounce of willpower into the ritual. The symbols glowed with an otherworldly light, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. Then, with a blinding flash, the energy surged outward, ripping through the entities like a cleansing fire. The shadows screamed, their forms dissolving into nothingness as the power of the banishment ritual took hold. The ground shook beneath me, and I was thrown backward, landing hard on the charred earth. When I opened my eyes, the world was silent. The oppressive weight that had haunted me for so long was gone, leaving only a hollow emptiness in its place. I had done it. I had banished the entities, severed their hold on my life. But as I lay there, exhausted and battered, I knew that the cost had been too high. The fire had taken everything from me, my family, my home, and a piece of my soul. I was free from the entities, but I was left with the ashes of a life that could never be rebuilt. The real horror wasn't the entities or the shadows. It was the knowledge that I had unleashed them, that my curiosity and desperation had led to such devastating consequences. I got up, gathering the remnants of my courage. The journey ahead would be difficult, filled with regret and sorrow, but I had to move forward. I had to find a way to live with the choices I'd made and the price I'd paid. The entities were gone, but the scars of their presence would remain forever. As I made my way back to the car, I realized that my story wasn't over. It was just beginning. A journey of redemption and healing. I had faced the darkness and emerged on the other side, forever changed, but determined to find a way to live with the consequences of my actions. And in that determination, I found a glimmer of hope, a light in the darkness that would guide me forward. The weeks after the banishment were strangely quiet, as if the world had finally exhaled. The oppressive atmosphere that had haunted me was gone, leaving behind a heavy silence. It was an emptiness I couldn't fill, a void left by the loss of my family and the horrors I had endured. I tried to settle into some semblance of normalcy, but every day felt like a battle to reclaim my life from the ashes. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, a far cry from the home I once knew. The walls were bare, the rooms filled with echoes of a past life I couldn't escape. My nights were haunted by nightmares, reminders of the entities I'd banished and the fire that had taken everything. Each morning, I woke up drenched in sweat, my mind replaying the horrors like a broken record. Despite the pain, I forced myself to keep going. I found a job at a local hardware store, the monotony of stacking shelves and helping customers a welcome distraction from the turmoil inside me. The days blended into one another, a blur of routine and solitude. I had become a shadow of my former self, a ghost wandering through the ruins of my life. But even in the depths of despair, there was a glimmer of hope. The notebook, my constant companion through this ordeal, had become a symbol of survival. It reminded me of what I'd overcome, the battles I'd fought and won. I carried it with me everywhere, a talisman against the darkness that had once threatened to consume me. I still hadn't heard from Verum Aeternum since that last message, but I hoped he was out there, helping others like me navigate the perilous world of the occult. His guidance had been invaluable, a beacon in the darkness that had guided me through the storm. I owed him more than I could ever repay, but I knew that gratitude was all I could offer. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my apartment, staring out at the city below, I realized I couldn't keep running from my past. I had to confront the reality of what had happened, to accept the consequences and find a way to move forward. The fire, the entities, the loss. It was all a part of me now, a part of my story that I had to embrace if I wanted to heal. I decided to visit the site of the fire once more, to face the place where my life had unraveled. It was a daunting decision, but I knew it was necessary. I needed closure, a chance to say goodbye to the life I'd lost and the people I loved. It was time to confront my demons and lay them to rest. As I approached the site, my heart pounded in my chest. The house was gone, reduced to a charred shell of its former self. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and memories, a haunting reminder of the night everything changed. I stood there, staring at the ruins, feeling the weight of grief and regret pressing down on me. I knelt on the scorched earth, whispering words of apology and farewell to my family. Tears streamed down my face as I poured out my heart, begging for forgiveness from the people I'd failed to protect. It was a cathartic release, a chance to unburden myself of the guilt that had been my constant companion. As I sat there, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. The entities were gone, the shadows banished, but the memories remained. They would always be a part of me, a reminder of the darkness I'd faced and the strength I'd found to overcome it. I had survived, and that was enough. Leaving the site, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I knew the journey ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and heartache, but I was ready to face it. I had emerged from the darkness, scarred but not broken, and I was determined to find a way to live with the consequences of my actions. The road to healing was long and uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. I had faced my demons and won, and that victory would guide me forward. As I walked away from the site, I knew that my story wasn't over. It was just beginning, a journey of redemption and hope in a world filled with darkness and light. And in that moment, I realized that even in the depths of despair, there was always a glimmer of hope, a light in the darkness that would guide me home.